Welcome back, everybody. We're going to do a deck tech video today. This is one of my arena decks. Now, I haven't played arena in a while. I haven't really been playing it much since the alchemy cards came out. I prefer my play experience to be more similar to paper magic. I haven't really had time either. I've just been really busy. But back when I was playing arena, this is the first deck that I custom made. It's inspired by one of the sample decks that you get when you do the arena tutorial, when you're first learning how to work the game. And I think that deck had this card you see on the screen here, Hallowed Priest. Whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on Hallowed Priest. I knew if I had two cards like this, I could build a deck around them. And when I found the other card, right here, Ajani's Pridemate, that's pretty much what I did. You can see this card is basically the same thing as Hallowed Priest. So to make sure those trigger lots of life gain to get the +1/+1 counters, I'm running Ajani's Welcome here. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under my control, I gain a life. And also Soul Warden. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, gain a life. Now Soul Warden triggers whenever either player plays a creature, so it's a much better card. Both of these are 1-drops. I got 4 of each in the deck, so I'd really like to play one of these on turn 1, followed by Ajani's Pridemate or Hallowed Priest on turn 2. My other 1-drop here is Healer's Hawk, a 1/1 creature with flying and lifelink. If I played this on turn 1, followed by an Ajani's Pridemate on turn 2, I would be able to attack with the Hawk on turn 2, and the Pridemate would still get +1/+1 when the lifelink triggered. Down here in the 2-drops, I have Daxos, Blessed by the Sun. In a mono-white deck, he makes a pretty good blocker because of his devotion ability, but the main reason I have him here is for his second ability. Whenever another creature you control enters the battlefield or dies, you gain 1 life. So again, this helps to trigger those life gain abilities. Dawn of Hope is my other 2-drop, but I really think of it as the card I want to play later in the game. The mana curve of this deck has a lot of low casting cost cards, so you can get into a situation where you've ran out of cards to play. If that happens, Dawn of Hope lets you pay 2 mana to draw a card every time you gain a life, and you gain life pretty frequently with this deck. The other thing Dawn of Hope does is generate a creature token, which will often trigger a lot of your enters the battlefield abilities, which then trigger the life gain abilities. So this card is basically something good to do with your mana when you don't have anything else to do. Down to the 3 casting cost cards, we have Light of Promise. Whenever you gain life, put that many +1/+1 counters on this creature. On the surface, that seems a lot like the Ajani's Pridemate and the Hallowed Priest, but it's actually much better. Instead of getting +1/+1 each time you gain life, you get +1/+1 for each life gained. You end up with a lot more +1/+1 counters. My favorite play is to put this on the Healer's Hawk because it has flying. It just exponentially grows each turn, and usually it can get through when you're attacking. It's pretty good on any creature, though. Heliod Suncrowned, an indestructible 5/5 for 3 mana. If you have enough devotion to white. Luckily, this is an all-white deck, so that's not a huge deal. Even if you don't have enough devotion to white, it's still a great card, because each time I gain life, I get to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature I control. His other ability lets one of my really big creatures with all the +1/+1 counters gain lifelink. So I can gain a lot of life, which is pretty handy. With this deck, I don't block very much, mainly I'm attacking. Usually I can gain enough life that I really don't need to block much. I can just take it. Linden the Steadfast Queen. Whenever a white creature you control attacks, you gain 1 life. This can trigger a lot of life gain during my attack phase. And my other 3-drop here is Banalish Marshal. Other creatures you control get +1/+1. This isn't quite as good as gaining life or triggering all the life gain abilities, but it does pump all the creatures and helps with defense. It's also nice with this 4-drop here, Leonin Warleader. Whenever the Warleader attacks, create 2 1/1 white cat creature tokens with lifelink that are tapped and attacking. With the Banalish Marshal, those would be 2/2 cat creatures. They both trigger the enter the battlefield abilities of the other cards, and the lifelink ability on them will trigger the life gain abilities on the other cards. Similarly, we have Ajani, Strength of the Pride. The main reason I have this in the deck is to create 2 of these Ajani's Pridemate tokens. After I've done that, I can use the +1 ability to gain life and trigger all the life gain abilities. And sometimes from all the life gain, I'll have 35 life or more, and I can trigger the 0 ability and just exile my opponent's stuff. Forecasting cost is as big as this deck gets. I have 1 Panharmonicon in here. Enters the battlefield abilities, trigger an extra time. It's a really great card to have in here, but I only use 1 because the high casting cost means I don't really get it out all that often. For the land base, I have 2 Castle Ardenvales. It's pretty easy for me to have a Plains in play before I play this card, so the drawback doesn't affect me much. Mainly it just provides white mana, the same as a Plains would, but it has this extra ability that's sometimes really handy. It can create a creature token. That can make all the enters the battlefield triggers happen even if I'm out of cards to play. 20 basic plains. I like the sunflower art here. We had a lot of sunflowers in Kansas where I grew up. And 1 Bonder's Enclave. I didn't want many lands here that don't produce white mana, but I pretty often have a creature with power 4 or greater, and it's nice to have this ability to draw a card if I run out of cards in my hand. The only other card here I didn't mention is Voice of the Blessed. This is a newer addition to the deck. This wasn't originally in my build, but once this card was added to Arena, I just had to have it in the deck. It's another 2/2 for 2 mana, and it has a similar ability to Ajani's Pridemate and Hallowed Priest, but it has some additional abilities also. If it has 4 or more counters, it gets Flying and Vigilance. If it has 10 or more counters, it gets Indestructible. Now, originally this was a 60-card deck with 4 Ajani's Pridemates and 4 Hallowed Priests. When I put the 4 Voice of the Blesseds in, I moved 2 Hallowed Priests to the sideboard, and that makes this a 62-card deck. You can see it up at the top here, 62 out of 60 cards. That's a little unusual. A lot of times I like to stick to 60 cards, but I do think it's nice to have a couple extra copies of what's basically the main card in the deck. So 4 Ajani's Pridemates, 4 Voice of the Blessed, and 2 Hallowed Priests. I have like 10 copies of this card in the deck. That really helps with consistency. Looking at the sideboard here, here's the 2 Hallowed Priests. Here is a Fountain of Renewal, which is another way to trigger life gain every turn. And here is 4 Deafening Silence. I found these to be pretty handy. If I'm going up against a deck that plays just a lot of cards every turn, usually a blue deck, I will sideboard all 4 of these in. Playing one of these on turn 1 before your opponent can counter it can just shut down decks like that. The other sideboard cards here aren't really very important. There's another Banalish Marshal, Cathar's Crusade. At a cost of 5 mana, I just never really get this out. At least not soon enough for it to have much effect on the game. Angel of Vitality. Whenever you gain a life, gain that much life +1. It has flying, which is nice. It gets a bonus if I have extra life. But I just didn't need more cards in the 3-drop spot of the deck. It's an okay card. And Angelic Gift. This lets me give one of my big creatures flying, so that hopefully it can get through and end the game without being blocked. I had an epic game with this deck versus a Scoot Swarm deck. They just had a ridiculous number of tokens, as Scoot Swarm decks do, and I had a ridiculous amount of life gain on my gigantic creatures. My creatures were like 500 power and toughness, so I'd be gaining that much life each turn through like a lifelink on the Heliod card, but they just chump block it with one of their tokens and like I couldn't get through. Similarly, when they would attack me with all of their stuff, I just had way too much life for them to be able to get me down to 0. It was an amazing game, and it's a matchup that I would love to repeat, but only on Arena, because the math for calculating all those triggers is just crazy. Arena is great for making sure you don't forget triggers. With those 2 decks, it's really nice to have the math automatically calculated for all the tokens, the life gain, etc. Okay, so let's give it a shot and see what it does. We'll just do a quick game here so you can get a feel for what it's like to play this deck. Dislike all. Alright, I've got a couple lands. There's my turn 1. There's probably my turn 2 here. I might do this instead. Let's see how it goes. Start with the Plains and the Soul Warden. Great card. Alright, let's do another Plains. And Daxos. Get some extra triggers for life gain here. Go ahead and swing. Playing a lot of colors there. All right. Let's see here. I think I want this. Let's go ahead and get another creature in play that gains counters.
True friends always stand by you.
Nice. Pumps up my stuff. Trample and haste. Sure, I can block that. We'll play Dawn of Hope first. Healer's Hawk. Auto pay, draw a card. Put another creature in. Probably should have triggered that Planeswalker ability before I played the Hawk. Then the new creature would get counters. Alright, swinging with this one and this one. His token generator's just making my creatures that much bigger. I've got plenty of life. I can just take that. Good game. And that's how it goes. That's a pretty fair example of the way this deck works. You play some life gain things, you play some creatures that gain counters, and they just keep growing. They get bigger and bigger. It's a fun deck for casual play, and it was a good place to start for my first self-built arena deck. That's it for this video. I'll catch you next time.